All right, it looks like we have a good amount of people in here, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on preparing for advocating during PVA's annual testimony. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So a few short notes about today's webinar. The webinar will be recorded and is available for viewing on pva.org. Closed captioning is available. Please click the CC button in the meeting controls bar at the bottom of your screen to turn it on. If you have any questions, please type it into the Q&A box. Questions will be answered at the end of the program. I wanted to extend a very special welcome to our PVA National President and Chairman of the Board, Robert Thomas. Robert, thank you so much for being here today. Please join us and share a few words with everyone.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this webinar this afternoon. As you all know, we usually be getting ready to go to the Advocacy and Legislation seminar here in May, but we decided to, in March, we decided to switch it to June. So the testimony will not change. I will be testifying, and I am here today to hopefully encourage you all to join the testimony and watch the testimony while you're at home. There will be a link provided for the testimony, and we want to most definitely get PVA's top priorities out to our congressional leaders. Again, you all can do this at home, but most definitely in June when you come and hit the Hill, we want to make sure we have a strong presence on the Hill and we do the right thing for PVA. So thank you all for joining us again. Back to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Robert. That was amazing. All right. Now I wanted a quick overview of today's webinar. We will have an update on our priorities from Heather Ansley, PVA's Chief Policy Officer. Then I'll be joined on screen with Morgan Brown, PVA's National Legislative Director. And for those that haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, I'm Lisa Elijah, PVA's Grassroots Advocacy Manager. And finally, but not least, we will finish off with an overview of PVA Action Force from myself before we hand it over to our very own Jennifer Hill, PVA Digital Content Specialist. Now I'm going to hand it over to Heather to speak on our 2024 priorities.
Thanks, Lisa. Before we get started, if you could unshare and then reshare the PowerPoint. All right. So I'm going to talk about some of the priorities that we have as an organization and for this year. And these are going to form the foundation of some of what President Thomas is going to talk about in his testimony next week before the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committees. So before we get into a little bit about what is the annual testimony and talk about what some of the priorities are, we wanted to just take a few minutes to go over our 2024 priorities we have as an organization, just to make you aware of those. And some of these are things we will touch on in the testimony. Others are things that are outside of the VA committee, so they won't be talked about, but did want you to know that we have several items that we are working on this year. So one of our top priorities is always protecting access to VA specialized healthcare services. Obviously, the VA spinal cord injury and disorder system of care is extremely important to our members. And we always want to make sure that there is sufficient funding going into that system. Just last week, we released with our partners DAV and VFW, the independent budget. That is our effort every year to give an overview of what we believe is truly needed for VA to continue to provide the services that our veterans depend on and have earned through their service. So that's really our statement as it relates to funding. As part of, in addition to funding, other things that we look at are staffing and infrastructure. We know that in order to be a good quality system, they have to have the people to provide the services, and also they have to have the buildings, the infrastructure in which to provide those services. So we're continuing to be concerned about staffing issues, about how many, for instance, nurses are available in the SCI Center. That impacts the quality of care. It also impacts, whether or not they're able to have beds open, if they've got the proper staff to be able to have veterans come in if need be. So that's an area we're continuing to look at. And then, as I said, infrastructure. We know that many of the buildings in the VA system are not the most modern and could use updates. We have places where we could use new facilities. And unfortunately, the amount of money that Congress gives every year to the VA isn't keeping track with the projects that we know are needed, including within the SCI system. We're fortunate that we do have projects, major projects going on in San Diego and soon will in Dallas. Those are going to create additional long-term care beds specific for SCI in new places, but much more is needed. And we're continuing to encourage that not only do we have more investment in that infrastructure, but that we find ways to prioritize the type of care that is unique to VA. So SCID care is one of those that VA does very uniquely well, that is not readily available in the community. And we feel like those projects should be prioritized. Our second priority is looking at access to long-term services and supports, and that goes into two buckets. One is the facility-based long-term care. So as I mentioned, we have some new projects coming online to bring new beds into the system. Within the VA, we currently only have 6 facilities around the country specializing in SCI care, long-term care for SCID veterans. And we know that that's just a drop in the bucket of what's actually needed. So we continue to try to find ways to prioritize those projects and to figure out new ways to provide more long-term care beds. We're also continuing to focus on home and community-based services and caregiver supports. We know that many folks want to stay in their homes. They prefer to stay in their homes. And we, of course, want to make sure they have the supports to do that. So we're working to try to increase access to programs like the Veteran Directed Care Program, trying to modernize the bowel and bladder program, and just in general, making sure that people have more access to supports and services in their homes. We're also continuing to work with the VA on reforming the family caregiver program. We know that it's still difficult for some to be able to get into the program. And then once you're in the program, being approved at the right tier of support. So we want to make sure that that's a support that is available, to help as many people as possible be able to continue to be independent. Under improving VA benefits and healthcare services for paralyzed veterans and their survivors, we have several different priorities. One of those is veterans and survivor benefits. We continue to look at ways to increase the special monthly compensation and aid and attendance benefits to offset the increased costs that we know folks are facing. Trying to improve access to benefits and services for veterans who've experienced military sexual trauma. Looking at ways to end the concurrent receipt or allow concurrent receipt and end the forfeiture of military retirement pay just to receive your VA disability compensation. And then also just trying to increase the levels of dependency and indemnity compensation. That's support for survivors. It really hasn't kept pace with where it should be, and also trying to ensure that surviving spouses of ALS veterans are not wrongly left out of opportunities to access higher levels of that dependent benefit. We also have a look at transportation programs and supports. We know that transportation is an ongoing issue in a variety of ways. And we've heard directly from VA in our site visits. We've heard from you as our members that access to transportation and getting to and from VA appointments is an issue. The amount of reimbursement for beneficiary travel, the current system you have to use to get that benefit. But then also just how to help those who are not eligible for beneficiary travel and need supports to be able to get to their appointments. Another category under benefits and healthcare is the life insurance benefit. There's the new VA life insurance program, which did make some helpful changes, but it ended the premium waiver for catastrophically disabled veterans and also didn't really recognize the limitations of having to survive 2 years in order to receive any benefit. home modification grants. You've heard us talk many times about increasing the amount of the home improvements and structural alterations grant. That program hasn't been updated since 2010. And the amount that is available to veterans is woefully inadequate, and really not able to provide hardly any type of meaningful assistance to people. We're also continuing to focus on healthcare and benefits for our women veterans, making sure that VA is providing appropriate services to meet the unique needs of our women veterans, and then seeking a repeal on the VA's ban on certain types of assisted reproductive technologies. A couple areas that you won't hear about necessarily in the president's testimony, because they're not in the jurisdiction of the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committees, are protecting the civil rights of people with disabilities. We continue to work on improving access to air travel, and also increasing disability access, trying to do more to help businesses comply with the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act, working with Department of Justice on finalizing regulations related to accessible medical equipment like weight scales and exam tables, and all the new forms of transportation that you're seeing and hearing about, autonomous vehicles, and trying to make sure that we have new forms of transportation are accessible, as well as the old ones like Amtrak. Improving access to Social Security benefits, trying to work to end the 5-month wait that folks have to have for Social Security disability insurance once they're approved. Also the wait for Medicare benefits. And then in a crossover, looking at caregivers, trying to give Social Security credits for caregivers who have to step out of the workforce. So they're not earning their own credits, but they're working, they're providing an important service, and we think that should be recognized. And then finally, increasing employment opportunities for veterans with disabilities, looking at the services available through the VA, but also through the states and their workforce systems, trying to make improvements there. So we have a lot of different priorities that we're working on this year. Next slide, please, Lisa. So I wanted to just quickly, and you will get copies of these slides, so you don't have to try to write this down, but you certainly can. We have a website that is focused specifically on our policy priorities. We've got the actual link to that. And then when you go to that website, there's a lot of different links you can look at. These are all linked, so when you get the webinar PowerPoint slides, you could click on them, but you can also go directly to PVA's website. The overview of the priorities I just talked about is available in a document on our website. We also have what we call our journey legislation map, which looks at some of the bills that we're prioritizing this year, trying to get over the finish line. And then we have individual policy papers in 6 different areas that match up to our priorities to provide a little more in-depth discussion of the issues, some statistics, and also connections with legislation that we support. So wide variety of resources available on our website, and we would encourage you to go visit that. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. So now I'll be joined with our very own Morgan Brown, and I'll go ahead and be asking him, and we'll be talking about the president's and joint testimony. Morgan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome, and good afternoon, everyone.
So Morgan, could you tell us a little bit about the joint hearings are, who's testifying, and more importantly, why is a joint hearing important to PVA members?
Certainly. So each year, the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committees hold a joint hearing so representatives from the nation's leading veteran service organizations, or VSOs, can brief them on their annual legislative priorities for veterans and their families. In a general sense, this signals the official start of the legislative push for many veteran service organizations in a given year. However, organizations like PVA work continuously throughout the year on our legislative priorities, but we recognize the importance of coming together with other veteran service organizations to brief Congress as a whole. This year's hearings, which will be held on the 6th, 7th, and 13th of March, will consist of 5 panels, 2 on the 6th, 1 on the 7th, and 2 on the 13th. So Veterans of Foreign Wars will go on the first panel on March 6th, followed by our national president, Robert Thomas, a representative from the Wounded Warrior Project, a representative from the National Association of State Directors of Veterans Affairs, someone from Mission Roll Call, someone from Blue Star Families, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, the Blinded Veterans Association, the Service Women's Action Network, the Student Veterans of America, and then AMVETS. On Thursday, the only day where there's a single panel, Congress will hear from DAV, one of our IB partners. And then on Wednesday, March 13th, the first panel will be the American Legion. And then the second panel will consist of Jewish war veterans, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans, Military Officers Association of America, the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers, the National Congress of American Indians, Vietnam Veterans of America, the National Guard Association of the U.S., and then finally the Fleet Reserve Association. So to me, the presentations are important because they provide the Congressional Veterans Affairs decision makers with a clearer picture of the needs and challenges being faced by veterans. And as you heard me read off the list, each legitimate association represents a different portion of the veterans community as a whole. So the collective presentations give Congress a fuller picture of the needs of veterans. And it comes at kind of a crucial time because this is traditionally the time frame when Congress begins to deliberate on legislation for the coming year, to include funding in this case for FY25, the next fiscal year. At the same time, though, having a place at the table shows the members of a particular association that their organization has legitimate input in shaping veterans legislation. And just putting it another way, it means organizations like PVA have demonstrated themselves to be a credible source of information on veterans issues. Achieving this level of acceptance takes a lot of hard work, and keeping us there is a responsibility we do not take lightly. We do that by identifying verified problem areas to Congress, and in the case of PVA, whenever possible, we offer solutions to correct them. This is something that PVA has been doing for more than 75 years.
Very well put. Thank you, Morgan. On top of that, I understand you've been working with President Thomas to prepare his written testimony. Could you give the listeners a glimpse into the level of effort that goes into preparing PVA's annual legislative presentation?
Certainly. So PVA, I'm not sure whether you can actually see this or not. Got to get it to where you can zoom in. Nope. We'll try it a different way. As as Heather had spoke of earlier, she kind of gave you the quick down and dirty on our 2024 policy priorities. And that is really kind of the foundational document for us in building the legislative testimony. It's by and large, it's a month-long process where we take each individual area that we previously have identified as a priority in a given year, and then we go back and we look at the issue. Number one, we want to make sure that it continues to be a problem area. We want to make sure that our the justifications that we used to try to get a particular issue fixed is accurate. Where possible, we like to come up with personal examples to help drive a point home to Congress. It's a better way to communicate a message. And then certainly when it comes to legislation, we want to go back, make sure that we've identified every piece of legislation that might affect or have a positive outcome on eliminating or resolving that legislative priority. Make sure that it's the correct bill number, make sure that we continue to support it. And then, of course, like I said, most importantly, because there's a lot of companion bills, and in some cases this year, we have 3 or 4 pieces of legislation addressing a particular issue of interest to our members. We want to make sure that we are identifying the ones and putting our backing behind the ones that are probably have the greatest likelihood of passage.
Thank you so much. Now, I know you'd mentioned a few. Let's dive a little bit deeper into different subject areas that we will be talking about in the presentation. So the first being access to care. Could you talk a little bit more about what is going to be in the testimony in terms of that subject?
Certainly. So we use the annual legislative presentation not only as an opportunity to identify problems, but in some ways to educate congressional members on, and in our case, what the VA's system of care looks like for a patient with a spinal cord injury or disorder. So Mr. Thomas's statement will begin by explaining the VA SEID system of care, talking about the hub and spoke model, who is necessary to make that model run correctly, any type of what do you want to call it, barriers to care that may continue to exist. In this case, we are aware there are still some SEID centers that are imposing like masking restrictions or even visitor restrictions on some of the units, and that we've been encouraging facilities throughout the year to increase recreational opportunities both in and outside of the center, as well as returning to the practice of open dining. So you would be surprised, the majority of congressional members, and certainly the overwhelming majority of the staff, have very little knowledge about the system of care available for spinal cord injury patients. And we take that education responsibility very seriously. One of the factors regarding the access to care that we are particularly concerned about, in the past year and a half or so, Congress has passed 2 pieces of legislation intended to help VA hire more doctors and nurses into the VA healthcare system. That was through the PACT Act and then the WISE Act. Unfortunately, even though VA hired an additional 61,000 people last year, that almost record level of hiring within the VA healthcare system really has not had an impact whatsoever on the SEID system of care. For the past couple of years, in fact, the past 3 years, we see that the SEID system has about 600 vacancies. And I think there's only a difference of 1 from last year to this year. So clearly, while it may have helped VA hire additional personnel, medical personnel, it did not benefit the SEI system of care. And we're going to be asking Congress to examine what's going on with the hiring process and try to ensure that in 2024, more of those personnel make their way toward the VA healthcare system. In doing so, we will be helping to preserve and strengthen the VA specialized systems of care. And that's not just SEID care. That can be for like blind rehabilitation, amputee care, polytrauma care, certainly for TBI care as well. And preserving specialized systems of care like the SEID system is one of our highest priorities. I mentioned staffing, and the 61,000 employees that VA hired. And again, nothing that we've seen in the SEID system shows an ongoing improvement of staffing levels. So that's going to be a key point that Mr. Thomas will be driving home in his written statement. And I should add that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that in reality, so there'll be two presentations. There'll be the written presentation, which we will be transmitting to the committee tomorrow. And then Mr. Thomas will be making a shorter, a 5-minute oral presentation on the morning of March 6th. And so between the two, we will have the chance to highlight some of the top priorities. The advantage of the oral presentation is that in the event that something happens between the time that we send in the statement and the time that he gives the oral presentation, that we can adjust that oral statement to account for the breaking development. So moving on, if I may, I'm going to talk a little bit about VA infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Okay. So as I mentioned, we have 25 acute care centers, and then there are only 6 long-term care centers, and they age and range from 3 to 70 years, with an average age of about 38 years. We've got a lot of centers that have only had cosmetic or basic renovations, and 14 of the 25 acute care centers continue to use 4 patient beds, accounting for 61% of the available inpatient beds. The high percentage of 4-bedroom rooms limits our bed capacity whenever a patient needs to be isolated. Heather mentioned the projects that are going on in Dallas and San Diego, but we're going to identify or press Congress to take a look at and consider funding a couple other projects that are on the books and were partially funded by Congress in past years and then set aside for unknown reasons, but could easily be revived and then funded by Congress. And that includes an acute facility at Bronx, VA, and then a long-term facility at Brockton, VA, which was intended to modernize and expand capacity there. Again, both of them were considered to be shovel ready, and for inexplicable reasons have been abandoned by the VA. At the same time, though, we need VA to develop a comprehensive plan on how it intends to address the ever increasing need for both acute and long-term care for SEID patients throughout the country. And then coupled with that, we're asking Congress to support and then pass what we call the BUILD Act, which would improve staffing at VA to manage construction of VA assets and ensure that there are concrete plans to improve the planning, management, and budgeting of VA construction projects in the future. So, continuing with access to care this year, one of the areas that we're going to be delving into that we haven't touched on in a couple of years is access to inpatient mental health and substance use disorder treatment. This particular level of care is almost non-existent within the VA healthcare system, certainly within the SEID system of care. Just depending on the year, at one point, I know that there were like a couple of beds that were available for substance use disorder treatment. Apparently now those may not be available. So there may be no capacity within VA. And we believe that this is an area that both VA and Congress need to provide greater attention to. And because it's a well-established fact that there's a strong link between spinal cord injuries and disorders, depression and other mental illnesses, and then substance abuse conditions that come along with that. And we've seen several instances over the past year where the need was there, but the VA was incapable of providing that level of care. The next area I'll touch on here, as Heather mentioned, we're going to be focusing very heavily on the VA's long-term services and supports, or home and community-based services, however you want to look at it. Fact of the matter is VA's capacity to provide long-term care from an institutional level is grossly insufficient. All totaled, the department's only required to maintain 198 authorized long-term care beds. In reality, that's kind of, I guess, kind of like the faulty number. They have to have 181 operating beds. As of January, only 169 beds were actually available. And the number fluctuates depending on different variables like staffing, women residents, isolation requirements, and the like. So when you average that out across the country, it still equates to about 3.4 beds available per state. The projects in San Diego and in Dallas will add additional beds, but we're looking at like 2027, to a couple of years from now. And the project in Dallas has the capability to be expanded to provide an additional 30 long-term care beds. And so we'll be urging Congress to provide the necessary funding to try to complete the build out of that facility, so that the facility, instead of only having the 30 beds and 27, would actually provide the 60 beds. So another area we're going to be hitting hard on in the statement is the importance of improving the availability of VA's home and community-based services. As most of you know, we've been working now for several years on legislation that would expand the availability of programs like veterans directed care to all VA medical centers. It would eliminate the cap that VA is allowed to pay for home care. Currently it's set at 65%. It would improve things like the caregiver program, require the VA to do a warm handoff. If the veteran is deemed to be not eligible for the caregiver program, but they are eligible for veterans directed care, would require VA to sit down with that veteran and then help them apply for that program. That legislation, it's the Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act. The House passed it earlier, in December, HR 522, I believe it is. And the legislation has been adjusted slightly, and it is now being rolled over into a much larger omnibus package. And we're simply waiting for the Congressional Budget Office to provide Congress with some figures on the cost of that legislation. And we will be asking Congress to pass that legislation as quickly as humanly possible to ensure that these much needed changes are made. And another area is we're also going to ask Congress to pass the Expanding Veterans Option for Long-Term Care Act, which would create a pilot program at 3 of the VISNs, the Veteran Integrated Service Networks. This would allow VA to test the benefit of having VA pay for the care. Currently, VA can refer you to this level of care, but they can't actually pay for it. So we think that there is a lot of potential in running that pilot, and we believe that it will demonstrate in the long run that it's a better situation for the veteran, certainly provide them with a better outcome, and may even do it at a lesser cost to VA. So, moving on, we're going to be talking about the importance of addressing the direct care workforce shortage. Even if you're lucky enough to be a veteran that's eligible for veteran directed care, if you can't find the worker to provide the care, the benefit really has little value to you. And we've got a couple of good examples of members who have had to interview, in one case, over 100 workers just to try to find somebody who was capable of providing the level care that they needed. In other areas where the country, we're aware of veterans that are, they have the hours, and they just can't find anybody at all. They're just, those workers don't exist. And so we're going to be urging Congress to consider, to begin working on programs that will develop a direct care workforce specifically to provide care for veterans. Heather mentioned the caregiver program. We are anxiously awaiting some proposed changes from VA regarding this program. PVA disagreed with the restriction that a veteran had to have a 70% disability rating in order to be eligible for the program, as well as a number of other aspects of the current program. We believe that VA should be adopting a less stringent requirement, particularly when it comes to performing activities of daily living. And we've made our recommendations known to VA. This will be an opportunity to lay those out to Congress. And certainly when the time frame comes that VA makes those proposals, we hope that they will have listened to our recommendations and incorporate some or all of them. One big area that we're going to talk about on healthcare access is codifying the bowel and bladder program. There's just been a constant stream of reports of problems, particularly with reimbursement, that either folks in our department or in the medical services or veterans benefits division have had to address on behalf of our members. Part of the problem is that this isn't a statutory program. This is a program that VA is running out of the SEID National Program Office. And because it's not a formal program, one set of rules at one location, another set for another. There have been some efforts in recent years to kind of standardize some of the paperwork and requirements for it. And while that was a welcome step forward, it's not enough. And we are going to ask Congress to make it a statutory program, and then most importantly, to make the payments that the caregiver receives for providing that care tax-free in the same manner that the payments that are given to members of the caregiver program are tax-free.
Morgan, I know we're running a little short on time. The caregivers are an incredibly important piece that we advocate for, but I know with our members, a lot of us have a lot of needs or a lot of things that you've covered that we want to specifically support or represent. And I know these hearings, are there any specific types of requirements for even a member or a person of the public to get into a hearing to listen and sit on them?
Actually, that's a very good question. No, the hearings are a public venue, meaning that anyone wishing to do so, if they're here in the National Capital Region, they can come in and witness the proceedings. And in the event that you're not here, they are also televised, and the We will post the link, I'm sure, in the Washington update that'll be coming out sometime here in the next few days, as well as making it available on the PVA website and on our social media sources as well.
Yes, absolutely. We have a, I don't want to lead too much into this, what Jen will be covering, but we do have a member toolkit and it will have a link to that. So anyone who is interested in viewing remotely will be able to do so. Well, Morgan, that was just an amazing amount of information that I think was incredibly helpful, especially for an individual who's never heard of the joint hearing before and able to really get a grasp of why it's important to us and why it is that we're covering it right now. So I just wanted to thank you for taking time out of your day to cover that. And I'm sure if you'll hang around a little bit more at the end, I'm sure there's going to be some questions that you might be able to cover.
Absolutely.
All right, so I will go ahead and see if I can unpin you, and then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There is one thing I want to show in terms of advocacy efforts, at least so we can do it at home as well. And so that is, I'll go ahead and make sure we have that, is our PVA website. So in order, what you are able to use within the PVA website is if you go to our Veterans and Disability Advocacy and scroll down to our PVA Action Force. This is essentially our grassroots efforts. This is where we're able to reach out to individuals of Congress in order to go ahead and make our voice known on there. So if you scroll down, we have some information here on our blog posts. We do a lot of information and updates that we think are important for our individuals to see. And then here we have our bills that we're really trying to campaign on and advocate on that are going through either the House, the Senate, or both to try to become a bill. And so if you click on one of them, I will go ahead and look. Let's click on improving disability access at VA. So it'll go through brief breakdown of what that bill is, why it's important, as well as the bills in the House, the Senate. And then if you look over here on the right-hand side, there is where you can compose a message to your representative. I live in DC, so that happens to be my representative is Delegate Norton. You can then, as subject, you can put in a little thing if you'd like. You don't need to, but say, please support our veterans. And then it just goes into more detail on that. Now, I've already done them before, so it remembers me a little bit. It has my information. I just unclick send me a text because I'm already signed up for it. And if I have that, then it will give me an error message. And then it remembers all my stuff. Yes, I would love alerts on what's going on with PVA and remember me. So that way, all I can do is essentially just hit one click and then we're good to go. And then that sends it to my representative and that's it. It's pretty easy, pretty simple. Very easy way of going ahead and going about it. So let me see if I can grab something really quickly from us here. All right, and with that, I'll go ahead and Jen, if you're able to join us, I'm going to go ahead and see if you can share your screen and you can go ahead and talk to our members a little bit about social media and what they can do to get involved.
Yes. Are you guys seeing my screen? The PowerPoint?
Yes, we are.
Sweet. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Hill. I am the digital content specialist here at PVA. So what that means is I handle PVA's social media. And I am so privileged to be able to come and talk to you guys today about the social media part of our toolkit. So before we dive into our toolkit, I want to just go over the goals of our testimony and sharing it on social media. So what we're trying to do by sharing the testimony and building hype around it on social media is just to promote the testimony and raise awareness around our certain issues and our priorities. The next thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage family members and our friends to send those PVA Action Force letters that Lisa was just showing us. And we can do this all through social media. And we have a toolkit, like Lisa mentioned, that has some sample social media posts and images that you can share on your platforms to help raise awareness. I also wanted to go through some tips that we have for helping us promote this event And one of the first ways that you can help promote the testimony is just by taking behind the scenes photos and videos if you're watching the testimony yourself or your chapter is, and just share those on your social media platform saying, hey, you know, we're watching the testimony right now. We encourage you to join us in doing this. Another thing that you can do is just record short videos expressing your excitement about the testimony and also sharing your thoughts on our priorities. If there are any priorities that you're really passionate about or that speak to you, record a video that's, you know, just really short, less than a minute, saying why it matters and why you want people to help us get this bill passed. And when you make this content, please feel free to share it with me. This is my email, and like we've mentioned, you'll get all these materials afterwards, but feel free to email me this content and we would love to see it and use it if we can. The next thing that we encourage you to do is to use your support system. So going back to those PVA Action Force letters, tell your family, your friends, colleagues, neighbors, literally anyone you interact with, tell them to go sign these letters on our PVA Action Force website. And just remind them, it doesn't take much time, less than a minute, truly, as Lisa was just showing us, to just sign that letter. And it makes such a huge difference for the entire community. And use our toolkit. You'll be sent a link to it after this, but just use copy and paste that social media copy we have and download those images and just share them on your channels, and encourage your friends and family to share that post too, to just really reach everyone in your network. And if you do have family or friends who interact with that post, or if they share it or comment on it, just give them a quick like or a quick reply saying, you know, thank you so much for helping me spread the word. I really appreciate it. And just reiterating why it's so important. So I wanted to go through some of the social media posts that we have prepared for everyone to share. So this first one is just kind of before the testimony, kind of letting everyone know that this is happening, explaining what it is, and encouraging them to share those PVA Action Force letters and sign them. The next one that we have is for the day of. Just again, reminding everyone, hey, today's the day. Join me in watching this at 10 a.m. You can watch the video or you can sign a PVA Action Force letter. And the next one we have is for after the testimony happens, just sharing that stream for anyone who might have missed it. And again, as always, telling people sign those letters. And once we're through testimony, we're going to be sharing some priorities. So we're going to be diving deeper into the priorities, really explaining to everyone why these matter, and leading them to that PVA Action Force letter to sign and share. I realize I'm talking about our social media. So while I have 104 of you present, if you're not following us on our social media platforms, I really encourage you to. And I encourage you, if you're sharing any content related to the testimony or our priorities, feel free to tag us using these handles. We're going to kind of go into that in a second. And I also encourage everyone to use our hashtags. So brief explanation of hashtags, if you don't know what those are essentially searchable keywords on social media. And we like to try to use the same ones so that we can kind of see what everyone's posting and kind of just have a connected voice all around this one hashtag. So we're using hashtag pushing access forward, and we're also using hashtag PVA Action Force. So while I have everyone too, I wanted to quickly go through how to find and tag your congressional representatives. So while you're talking about these issues on your social media platforms, we encourage you to tag your congressional representatives to kind of get their attention and let them know that this really matters and that they should be helping us out here. So I'm gonna do that real quickly. So you're gonna get these materials in the end, but we're gonna go to this, and I'm gonna copy this as well. We're gonna go to this page on the congress.gov website, and we're just going to input our home address into here. And just so everyone knows, this is not my home address. This is the address for Burger King in my hometown. So, and as you see, when I input my home address in there, it automatically grabs all of my representatives. So I'm going to go ahead and select my representative here. I'm going to click on their name. And then I'm going to click on their website. Now you'll see here up at the top, and sometimes it's also at the bottom, and sometimes it's also even in, there might be what we call a hamburger menu, which is those 3-line menu. You'll find these social media icons. So we have right here, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, I'm just going to go ahead and click on this Facebook symbol. And now I'm at my representative's Facebook page. And what I'm trying to find is their handle. This is almost, if you think about it, like their social media address, almost like an email address for social media. So I'm going to go up to the top in the URL. And after this slash here, I'm going to grab this information. This is my congressman's social media handle. I'm now going to go back to Facebook and I'm going to start composing a post. Do not worry, I'm not going to release this just for demonstration purposes, but I'm going to type an @ symbol. This symbol is essentially saying to the social media platform, I want to tag this person, almost like I want to send a letter to this person. I'm now going to right click, I'm going to paste that information and I'm going to give it a space. Hopefully it'll start pulling it. There we go. So you'll see that I have this dialog box appear underneath. I'm going to go ahead and click that and you'll see that the text turns to blue. So what I would do here is say something like, dear representative, please help pass this or something like that. And then I would add any other media here. But this is just a quick way to tag my congressman and another way to just bring this to their attention, saying, hey, we want your assistance on this issue. So that is how you tag a representative on social media. And there are more instructions for different platforms that we'll be sharing afterwards. Oop, let me move this. Oops, sorry. It took me to the very beginning. My apologies. Okay. So we would really encourage you to help get involved on social media so that we can make testimony really loud and bring a lot of attention to it. And not only just testimony, but to our priorities as well. So let's work together. We encourage you to use your voice and really bring attention to these issues. And if you ever have any questions or concerns, you can feel free to email me here at my email, jenniferh@pva.org. And I believe we have some time for questions if anyone has any questions, specifically on social media. Oh, they are not able to unmute themselves, are they? Sorry. I think if you have any, you can feel free to put them in the Q&A section is probably the best way to do it.
Then we did have one question that said, is hashtag PVA 1946 still used?
We're not using that one as frequently. That more so looks like our handle. If you use an @ symbol instead of the hashtag, that will tag us so that we're able to see your post and we're able to interact with it, like, comment, or share it. But really for these posts, we're really using that pushing access forward and that PVA Action Force hashtags.
Then we do have one individual that said they couldn't write your email down quick enough. Could you repeat that for us?
Yes, let me see if I can go back a slide. Because I believe I had it there. So it's jenniferh@pva.org.
Perfect.
Sweet. Okay. Well, feel free to put any other questions in that Q&A function. And like I said, you can feel free to shoot me an email as well. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks so much, Jen. That was amazing. All right, so we do have a few other quick questions as well. So we had one for you, Morgan, specifically. It said, Mr. Morgan, do you review the PVA site visit reports to determine the needs for our SCI unit facilities?
We do indeed, as well as the government relations team meets regularly with the medical services team. And I should add that quite often there'll be a member from the government relations team that'll accompany medical services, the architecture department, out on some of those site visits. So we are definitely aware of what is going on at each of the medical facilities, right down to the number of vacancies that they have, the types of providers that they're lacking and the like. So, and we use that information to help develop the written statement.
And we do have two questions about the written testimony. They asked if they will be able to have access to the written testimony.
They will, after 10 a.m. on March 6th. Although the statement is written, it is embargoed. And we're prohibited from sharing it with anybody until the actual start time of the hearing. So on the day of the hearing, if you go to the to watch the video of the hearing, if you look down below, there should be a link. If it's the Senate page that you're watching, it'll take you directly to the individual statements. And if it's the House page, it'll take you to a link where all those statements are located at.
Thank you. Other than that, let me see here. I do have one question for Jen on social media. Jen, they asked, is PVA going to be expanding their social media presence on TikTok?
Yes. So we do currently have TikTok, but we are working on getting more video material to kind of really bolster that, especially as, seeing is believing, especially with video. So we're definitely exploring that more in this coming year.
And I'm just looking through to see what other ones we got here. Henry Walters is asking, from a standpoint of someone who's wanting to get into social media, what's the easiest way, and what could be a simple thing to get your foot kind of a little bit wet without getting too much into everything?
For social media, I think the best place to start is just to start small. And I think this toolkit is a really great stepping stone for some of that, to just use some of this pre-made material and revise it how you would like. And then also just keep it personal. You are the expert of your life. So, share your experiences and share your stories, and that authenticity is going to really come across. So definitely look at the materials we have in the toolkit, get inspired by them and use them, and kind of use that as a jumping off point for other things that you might be interested in doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And one point I did want to make as well is social media is an amazing tool. It's great in order to reach your representatives, but also you don't necessarily need to be a part of social media in order to do that. You can also do that through Voter Voice, but social media is a fun way to connect and kind of reach out to other people as well. All right, and with that, I do have one I will be answering in the chat or privately in the chat, but other than that, I'm just going to hold off for just a moment to see if there's any other information that is popping through your questions. Oh, we had a good question as well for Jen. Jen, could you share with us your official title, please?
Yes, I am the digital content specialist is my official title, I believe.
Yes. And what team are you in the PVA National?
I am in our marketing and communication department at PVA.
Awesome. And so a lot of times when we see social media posts or things, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, would you say that you are one of the faces that's behind that?
Yes, for the majority. We do also work with others who are kind of producing materials for us as well.
Amazing. Thank you. All right, let me look and see if there's any others. Morgan, I did have one question for you as well. There's one, and this will be probably our last one before we close out. Why are the requirements for SAH different?
So I'm almost curious if they could maybe give me just a little bit more information so that I can properly answer that. Are they asking why it's different in relation to the HISA grant?
I'll hold off a moment and see if they can type that in for clarity. It was asked anonymously. Let's see. That is a good question in terms of. Actually, Morgan, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share your email with them. And then that way we're able to get more information if they want to know a little bit more about that. And so that is Morgan B as in Brown at pva.org.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead and if you could ask him a little bit more clarifying question there in terms of if you're wanting to know more about SAH, he'd be happy to go ahead and help out with that. With that in mind, we are at 4 o'clock. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar on the President's testimony. Join us next time. We have a webinar on March 20th at 3 p.m. Eastern time. I'll be sending a link in the email following with the toolkit and a link for registration for that, and it's on voting rights. So thank you all for joining us and have a great night.